Okay, Audrey, you are live.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm calling this meeting to order at 10:35 a.m. I'm going to do a quick roll and then we'll get started. When I call your school's name, if you could just say your name out loud and we'll move forward. As Nantuck,
Claudia Goop.
Capital, Gateway, Housatonic,
Antonia Oglesby. I am also accompanied today by our student parliamentarian, Jocelyn Eagle.
Hello.
welcome. Manchester,
Cypress Cox.
Middlesex. Oh, Middlesex won't be able to join us today. Naugatuck, Northwestern, Quinnebog Valley, Three Rivers.
Good morning, Alan Lyon.
Hi, Ellen. Tunsis, Pearl,
I'm here, Audrey. This is Kelly Parody.
Eastern,
Nora Amush. I'm the new representative.
Southern,
Brandon Iving.
I'm here for Western, and Charter Oak.
Hi, good morning. This is Teddy Wong from Charter Oak.
All right, thank you all for coming. We do not have quorum today, so we are unable to vote on the approval of our previous meeting minutes. But we can go directly into our discussion with our guest speakers. And it looks like
Ben is here, Audrey.
Yeah, Ben Barnes has joined us. So Ben, thank you for coming, and you have the stage.
Good morning. Okay, I'm sorry, there was a little static in my office. Actually, children in my office pestering me. Are you ready for me at this point? Is that what I heard?
Yes, this is our time for you.
Okay. Great, thank you. So I just wanted, Angelo asked me to come and provide you guys with some information about what we've done with tuition fees and take any other questions you may have. So as you may or may not know, we submitted to the Board of Regents and they passed at the March cycle. So I guess meetings in the beginning and then toward the end of March, a proposal that freezes tuition and fees at the colleges and universities and at Charter Oak State College. So tuition and fees are the same as they were the year last year, or the current year that's ending in a couple months. There are a couple minor exceptions to that, which I will explain. One is that the UPass fee, which is a mandatory fee charged to students at all CSU institutions except 4. Currently, we do not have UPass at 4 institutions that do not do not yet have sufficient public transit service to make it worthwhile for students to get to and from school or wherever else, just because of where they are geographically. So that's Quinnebog, Eastern, Naugatuck Valley, and Northwestern, although I think Northwestern is coming on this year. So so the UPass program, because the state provides, the program is based on an agreement we have with the State Department of Transportation. They have been advised by the governor's office that they must make charge higher amounts for the U passes, the unlimited bus passes. We are so we have been basically told if we wish to continue the program, we have to charge $40 per student per semester. So at the schools where the program is offered, it's a mandatory fee for all the folks who are at those schools. It's still a great deal, especially because it still includes Metro North. So especially for students who are located on the shoreline, Gateway, Housatonic, Southern, for whom the train service is convenient. You can take trains to Stamford, to Bridgeport, all the way to the Greenwich line without charge, or use buses. We continue to think it's an important program. And while the $40 a semester charge is higher than it was, we still think it's a pretty good deal for students. I hope that the value will, that utilization will continue to rise. We are asking for, they're going to be providing much better information about ridership, and we have committed to being much more engaged with DOT to ensure that they provide and continue to improve service to our campuses and where our students are. So we're actively engaged with DOT to make sure that the pass is worth the money now that they've raised the price on us. But it's still relatively low. It was $20 before. No, there's no refund for students who don't use it. It's a mandatory fee. They're able to charge us so much less than the cost. I mean, an actual bus and rail pass would cost $300 or $400 a month. They're able to charge us so much less than the normal cost because we buy it for every student at a certain campus gets the pass. It does include ADA transit. It does work on the city bus. It does work for the ADA provided transit, which I think in New Haven is from there's a regional transit district. All those are covered under the UPass.
Ben, this is Angelo. If I could just, it's the state provided transportation. It's not third party private ADA like the Medicab type taxis and services. It's whatever state run, correct? I think
right, but the Department of Transportation provides ADA transit statewide under federal law, and it's included. It's free.
Perfect.
So there may be, obviously it doesn't work on Uber. It doesn't work on the local cab company, but it works for all the public transit that's available in the state. And I believe, I will have to confirm this. It's been a little while since I was in this business, but I believe that there is ADA transit available everywhere that's within, I think it's a mile of a bus line anywhere in the state of Connecticut, which in urban areas covers everything, and in rural areas covers many things, certainly where most of the places where people live. So I strongly encourage people to use the pass. And frankly, if you use the pass to offer any suggestions about how services could change or anything else, because we want them to be responsive to our transportation needs and to make sure that that's a good fit. I will tell you, we did not charge for the UPass in 2021. This current year, the pandemic year, we did not charge for it. We negotiated a dramatically reduced charge overall with DOT on the grounds that people weren't taking the buses at all for a while, and the ridership was way down. And because so many of our students, virtually all of our students were doing their work remotely, it didn't, there was less of an urgent need for transportation during the pandemic year. So they agreed to take a much lower amount in order to keep the program running. So the few students who were continuing to use transit would have access to the program. But we aren't able to continue to do that going forward once transit service resumes. I hope, during the next upcoming school year. The other big change was at Central. They restructured their meal plan. I think it was done in a way that's very favorable to students. It used to be an all you can eat or nothing at Central, if I recall, and now they've built in lower tiers for students who don't want to eat so much, or live, if you live nearby, if you have family nearby and you're only living on campus 4 days a week, in actuality you might want to buy a lower meal plan. They've also just reduced the price of all the meal plans. They found some ways to save money during the pandemic that they think they can continue. Living on campus at Central and eating on campus has gotten appreciably cheaper in this year's fees. Other than that, there are a couple of adjustments downward on the online fees. We'd been waiving those during the pandemic just as an emergency measure because everybody was taking online courses. But going forward, all the universities have reduced their online fees or changed it to a once per semester rather than charging it for each course that you take online. So that should reduce people's costs a little bit at the edge. Those are pretty small fees. So that's where we are. I will just tell you that the Board of Regents is keenly focused on affordability. And I personally am keenly focused on affordability. I think college is way too expensive and we should be contributing to make it less expensive. And the way we do that is by keeping the price low. And secondarily, by making more money available to students for financial aid. So we're using our federal funds to help us keep tuition down. It definitely makes it possible for us to freeze tuition in coming out of a tough year because we have some federal money to offset our losses from declines in enrollment. But we continue to also utilize the financial assistance money that came to us through the stimulus to try to help students as well. And the last comment I'll make is about that. We have all told across CSCU colleges and universities, we have about $150 million of federal money to use for student financial assistance between last March and September of 2023. So we have 2 more academic years in which to provide student financial assistance. So of the 150 million, we've already given away 60. That includes 30 million we gave away, this is rough terms, it's actually 28 million or something like that. We gave away last spring in checks to all the students, with different amounts depending on which school you were at. And there's a little bit of variation between the colleges and the universities, but basically payments in the close to $1,000 for students last spring. We did it again this spring. The only difference was in the colleges, it was more targeted towards students with financial need. So students with a 0 EFC got the largest grants, and students on Pell got larger grants, and other students got sort of nominal grants. We've given away a lot of money already. We have 90 million more to give away over the next 2 years. We're trying to develop plans for how to give that away. We'd like to try to package it with other financial aid that we provide to students, so that they can sort of see it coming and understand how that's going to fit into their financial planning for next year at college and the year after that. So we're hopefully going to be able to make some announcements over the next month or two about how that financial aid money is going to be used in the fall, so that you all can consider that when making the financial decisions you have to make about going to school in the fall. I will tell you that I would welcome suggestions from students and from this group as to what you believe is the best approach for us to take on structuring student financial assistance. So if the group has ideas, that would be great. And if not, I may come back to you in the coming months and ask for you to provide us with some members who can help us evaluate different ideas and different approaches that we might take. Because clearly the student financial assistance money is intended to make your lives easier and to help you all afford college more easily, especially coming out of the pandemic with all the issues that that's created for you. So we're trying to put it to work to help you, but if there are ways we should be doing that differently, I'd like to know about that. So with that, I will take any questions that any of you have.
All right, if you guys have questions, you just unmute and ask them right away.
Good morning, Mr. Barnes. This is Kelly Parody. I'm the representative at CCSU. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you for asking, and thank you for being here with us today. I have two questions. One, with the increase of the UPass, is it possible for our student government associations to step in to cover that extra fee? For one, if they want to. For two, the other day I was sitting in on the SAC meeting as well, and you were mentioning talk of using some of that money for the guided pathways. Can you please explain to the students how that might work and how that might look and what it looks like to you, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, the SGA funds, those are student-controlled funds. You certainly could use them to pay for, the UPass for students. There's no question in my mind. That's your call. So if that's something that you want to do, I'm sure we could work with the bursars to allow that to happen, whether you were going to provide, scholarships to students who demonstrated need or, write it down overall. It's across the system, it ends up being about $4 million a year to pay for the UPasses. Then that's what we raise from the $40 a semester per student. The question about guided pathways. So as you know, the system, the Board of Regents has adopted guided pathways, which is a suite of interventions that is intended to improve outcomes and retention in the community college sector. It is an evidence-based approach that has been developed at community college systems around the country. It has a lot of support from academics nationally who are focused on student success in the community college sector. One of the most visible and frankly the most expensive parts of that suite of policies is a much more intensive advisement called a case management advising approach, in which we have much lower ratios of students to advisors. So they recommend, well, the sort of the national standard for high quality advisement in community colleges is 250 students per advisor, and some campuses were many times above that. So we would, in order to implement this guided pathways advising component, we would need to hire a whole bunch of advisors. It is my view, and I think this is a view which is generally agreed to by a lot of the practitioners around the country who've implemented these programs, that they are effective at, when you provide the advisement along with some of the other policies, things that are generally intended to make registration and pursuit of a degree or a program easier for students. So if you put these things in place, including the advisement, you will get more students returning each year, fewer students dropping out, and in some cases, students attempting more credits because there's general agreement in the industry that taking more credits improves the likelihood that you will complete your degree or certificate and improves your academic performance. I know that seems counterintuitive to me, even that more classes sounds like harder work and harder to be successful. But the evidence does suggest that students who take a full-time load are more likely to complete at the end of the day. There are fewer opportunities for them to drop out. and that their academic performance is also as strong or stronger. So the idea is that if we implement this over a few years, we will begin to see higher retention rates, more credit attempts by our students, and more student success. That in turn generates more tuition revenue for us. So I mean, a student who drops out and doesn't come back to college next fall, for instance, that's a tuition that we would normally, that we would like to be getting. We would like to get, students enrolling until they complete their degrees and paying for those classes. In many cases in the community college system, paying with Pell Grants. As you may know, Connecticut is very fortunate to have community college tuition and fees that are able to be completely covered by Pell Grants if you are, as long as you're, still within your Pell eligibility and you meet the requirements on the FAFSA form. So our goal is to use some of the federal funds to help us staff up to the appropriate numbers of advisors so that we can have a more intensive advising program, and that that will in turn, over a couple of years, allow those advisors to increase our overall enrollment at the colleges as more students, fewer students drop out and students take more classes. So we will have higher enrollment, and that will in turn lead to higher revenues and allow us to fund the costs of those advisors going forward. But during the first few years, we have to pay the advisors, but they haven't, figured out, they haven't had an opportunity to have as much of an impact as they ultimately will. So it costs money in the short run. Hiring enough advisors to get everybody to a 250 student to advisor ratio across the colleges will cost about $20 million in additional staff, additional advisors to get up to those ratios. It's very difficult to hire people and to hire good advisors. We have to train them. There's some startup costs. We have to outfit, make sure there are offices and facilities at each campus for that advising to occur. So we're now working through all the details of what it would take to put that program in effect relatively quickly, and to use federal money to allow us to do that more quickly than we otherwise would. Before we got the federal grants, it was the plan of the Board of Regents and the system to gradually implement guided pathways advising by doing it at 3 campuses next year, and then another 3 campuses the year after that. And then I think it was a 3-year plan. So it might have been 3 and then 4 and then 5, if I remember correctly. So we were going to gradually implement the program over 3 years. Now we're looking at how much can we expedite the implementation of the program by bringing some of these federal funds to bear during the next 2 years. So we're hopeful that we can get it all done. We're still the folks at the system office who are tasked with planning this implementation are still working on it. And if we ultimately go with that as part of our plan for use of stimulus funds, I think that would be something we would probably just talk to the board about and put on a public agenda for the Board of Regents in May. So we need to make a decision relatively soon, and we'll be reporting on that on our preliminary plans for the use of stimulus funds to the board in May.
All right, thank you so much, Ben. You brought up earlier potentially getting more student feedback, and I want to mention to our members that one thing we can potentially do is organize a subcommittee that'll have a little bit more flexibility, basically, to meet as much as you want, potentially talk with Ben a little more often than our once a month setup if you are interested in that. We can't form a subcommittee today because of our quorum situation, but we are potentially having a special meeting before the end of the month, and maybe we can coordinate to make sure sometimes before Board of Regents meetings, they'll have us email in to confirm our attendance in advance to assure quorum, so we could maybe account for it then if anyone is particularly interested in the allocation of student relief funding.
I would be very appreciative if you would do that. I would be happy to work with a group that you designate. I would be happy to bring Steve McDowell, who's the head of financial aid, who is especially knowledgeable about how the FAFSA and financial aid system currently works and is involved in those discussions. We would very much welcome the views of students as we go forward making decisions about this.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
So Ben, correct me, Audrey, just one sec. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong. The 4 state universities are individually deciding how to spend that money. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean we are the role of the system office is a little different with the universities. They are much more autonomous and they have more ability to process this. So they, for instance, did their own mailings of funds and distribution of funds in March of 20 and March of 21. I do work with the universities, and we and make a concerted effort, which they all agree to make sure that their programs are similar. There's a little bit of dollar amounts are different because each university gets its own award of funds, but they have attempted to make sure that their programs are similar and parallel, so that students aren't confused. If you go from one to another, you have friends and colleagues at another school, that they're getting similar treatment. So we coordinate, and they try to provide a generally uniform approach across universities. The colleges, we have been doing it centrally at the system office, simply because the effort to pay. In March we had to send payments to 30,000 students, and now we've just embarked on an appeals process for the relatively small number who were excluded for one reason or another. So in order to spare the college campuses the duplication of that effort over and over again, we've done that centrally. But I know that the universities are also very interested in rethinking how best to use the student financial assistance going forward. And we all talk, and we coordinate our efforts. And I expect that if we land on an approach that works in the colleges, that the universities will consider whether a similar parallel approach of the universities makes sense as well. They're making the same sets of decisions now as well.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure if we organize some kind of subcommittee, that at least a few times we could rope in some of the representatives from the university to share a little bit about their thinking if they wanted to.
Yeah, I'd be happy to
All
coordinate
right.
that.
Angela, do you want to introduce our next guest? And thank you so much, Ben. That was excellent, for giving us further information to consider and to discuss as a group.
Always a pleasure. Take care.
Can you guys hear me?
Thank you, Ben. Sean Bradbury is our Director of Government Relations for the System Office, and we had asked him to come give a brief update on some government relations issues that kind of affect the colleges and universities. Sean, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm always happy to come in. The session gets a little intense from time to time, but I'm always happy to come in whenever you all would like an update on what's going on in that building. Especially in years like this when we're virtual, it tends to be a little hard to get a grasp on things. So I'll just give you a quick run over of kind of where things sit right now. And sorry, my lens camera keeps going in and out here, so sorry if I look like I'm on witness protection program. But I'll give you a quick rundown of the major issues that we're looking at in higher ed, where things stand, and kind of what the next steps are, if that works for everybody. So this has actually been the busiest year in higher ed's, the higher ed committee's history, at least since I've been lobbying up there, which is been 11, 12 years, I think. So I had my intern actually count out, this is the most number of bills that have come out of committee in the last, I think, 6 or 7 years. So it's, despite what you've heard from other committees where they're going to scale back because of the pandemic and that folks can't be as engaged, the higher ed committee has kind of been full steam ahead. And a lot of that has to do with how new both the chairs are. So for those who are paying attention, midstream, we had Senator Will Haskell left the higher ed committee to chair the transportation committee. And we had Derek Slapp step in to fill in as the Senate chair, who was brand new to the committee. I think he had served once when he was a member of the House years ago for one term. And Josh Elliott, who is brand new to the committee and brand new to the chairmanship. So both of that lends to a lot more bills coming out than we typically see. In years past, when you have chairs that have been around a few more years, they tend to kill a lot more bills and filter out ideas that have already been tried and ideas that have already been rejected, and things that just frankly cost too much money that they know the higher ed institutions can't afford right now. So we've seen an avalanche of bills. Some of them good, some of them a little challenging. Some of the good ones that are moving forward that we've been really proud to work with our colleagues at CCIC, so that's the Association of Independent Colleges, and our peers at UConn there's 3 main bills that are student facing. So there's a comprehensive mental health bill that comes from the recommendations of this task force on mental health care at institutions of higher education. What that does from our end is mostly just convenes councils on each campus that have to assess the services that are provided, reevaluate, and determine where they can improve in consultation with DEMIS, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, an epidemiologist, and some other staff who would be advising us on how we can best do that. And it has a large insurance rider that's attached to that just has a lot of things on what is considered mandated coverage, the number of visits that have to be covered. So it's kind of what we're seeing a lot this year of these Frankenstein monsters of bills, things that should be in 2 separate committees getting attached. So that one's still moving forward, and we're working on some language that can have a little bit more flexibility for all of our institutions that have different needs. The second one is one on food insecurity. So that one, as we all know, all of our campuses have food pantries. This is something that, food insecurity and housing insecurity are 2 of the biggest issues facing students across higher ed. It's not for lack of understanding that we know that there's that issue, but there's really identifying the best ways that we can serve students beyond just providing food pantries. So the bill seeks to, it's another kind of information gathering bill that looks to collect a lot more data on where those needs are, how they can best be met, what programs can maximize SNAP benefits for students, things like that. So still some more language that's moving forward, but still working on some fine tuning of that language. The other one that I know, I believe you all have talked about and has gotten a lot of attention with student governments and associations across the state has been the bill on campus sexual misconduct climate surveys. So that one that had been a behemoth of a bill to work on, and I think we're all really proud, both on the institution side, the advocate side, and the nonprofit side, and legislators who have all worked on this across all the stakeholders to come up with some compromise language that works for everybody to really address the concerns from advocates to make sure that we're getting better information, that we have that amnesty piece in there, but deals with the institutional concerns around the cost of full campus climate surveys every 2 years. Those surveys can range into the tens of thousands. I think Central had one that they quoted at over $90,000 one year. These can be very expensive surveys. So we want to make sure we can find a way to collect this information without that giant cost factor in when you're looking at this is the worst year financially that higher ed as an industry has seen in living memory. We want to make sure that we can still do this good work without adding cost burdens that will eventually get passed on to students. So the language of that, we are all, everybody has signed off on, from the advocates to us legislators. We're excited. That's moving forward. That's one of those bills that has come out of committee in kind of its final form. We don't anticipate any amendments beyond maybe some technical changes that somebody noticed, something isn't conforming with state statutes later on. So those are the big issues out of the higher ed committee. Their JF deadline. So JF means joint favorable. That's the deadline by which committees have to pass out any bills that originated in that committee. The higher ed's JF deadline was, I think, March 23rd, 24th, somewhere around there. So they're right now for the rest of the session only acting on bills that are referred to them. Our other two big committees are the Appropriations Committee and Finance Committee. So approps, that's where, Ben is our best kept secret there. So we've been advocating strongly for, not just preservation and increased funding for the block grants for our institutions, but you may have seen in the governor's proposal, or you may not. I know it's not something that got really reported on that much, but in prior years, we have been given supplemental fringe benefit support for the colleges, recognizing that those fringe benefit costs get passed on to students. They're a legacy cost that we don't really, it's not something that's a direct service that we want to be having students pay for. So legislature recognizing that in prior years had passed on, I think it was $22.34 million to the colleges to pay for that. They also provided some money to UConn Health. In the governor's proposal, that money was included for UConn Health, but not for the colleges. So we've worked with the committee to restore that, to restore a little bit more funding for Charter Oak because they could really use a little bit of extra help. And then just to make sure that we are fighting for as much of a preservation or increase of our block grants as we can across all of our constituent units. The one other piece you may notice is, so the governor's proposal did include funding for PACT for the first time. PACT has been unfunded on the state side. The Board of Regents, recognizing the importance of the program, put up money from the Community College Reserve Fund to cover that while the legislature kind of figured out how they were going to actually give us the money for the program they created. So the governor's proposal includes $6 million in FY 22 and 23 for that program. We are hopeful that we can get the committee to fully fund that program north of $14 million to meet the full need that's out there for students. But what we're also working with them on for what's called the deficiency bill, which is basically, the budget behind you that you want to, you notice some shortfalls that you need to patch up. That's what the deficiency bill is for. So we're looking to try to get money in there to cover what legislators had promised to do, which was to pay for the PAC program, to reimburse us for what we had put forward. So we're working with the committee on that. In the Finance Committee, I should say the Appropriations Committee JF deadline is April 23rd. So that means probably the 21st or the 22nd, they'll have a final committee budget that they will put forward and vote on for the biennium. And that is by no means the end. That still keeps moving forward and our advocacy continues until the governor's pen hits paper on there. So we will likely see still some significant revisions from the committee's budget to what is actually voted on the floor, sometime hopefully in May. But as we've seen in years past, when you get some really complicated budget years, they may not end up passing it by the end of session. They may come in for special session. So a lot of that still to be determined. So the Finance Committee is our other big committee that we deal with, specifically the General Bonding Subcommittee. So that's where we get all of our capital funds from. We gave our annual presentation to that subcommittee last week, that we have some follow-up that we're providing for information requests and advocacy for our capital projects across all of our campuses. The governor was pretty generous in what he provided to our campus, but we still have there's always a couple projects that don't make it in from what we've requested to what is actually proposed. So that's our job. Specifically, Keith Epstein, our VP of Facilities, is working to make sure that we can get those projects into the final package. So sorry if that was a lot of rambling there, but the rest of the session is going to look pretty different from what we've seen in years past. Typically this is when things start gearing up and we're in that building, we being, advocates, lobbyists, the in-house folks like myself and legislators are in that building, almost all day, every day. Right now with everything virtual, it's still not open to the public. So they're not really engaging at the pace that they typically do at this point in the session. But we're hoping that will start speeding up and they'll start actually, scheduling floor sessions and moving bills forward, and we'll work with them, to make sure that the pieces that we're advocating for make it across the finish line, and obviously the ones that we're a little concerned about don't make it across the finish line. So this session will end beginning of June. So there's, I think, 7 weeks at this point left of the session. So we're kind of in the, I don't know any good sports analogies. I am not an athlete, so I would say, what is that, the 10-yard line, I guess might be the analogy there. But the work continues. But after all that rambling, I am happy to take any questions or address any concerns you might have.
Thank you so much for that great presentation. Additionally, just like you said, any of you, if you want to speak up, if you have any questions, I'm glad to hear about the the mental health bill moving forward. That was one of the ones we discussed at length during our basically legislative update meeting earlier this year. The debt-free community college program funding, has anything changed significantly in that, or is the legislator still planning to basically allocate a portion of the new online lottery program?
Yeah, so the initial conversation was around 3 separate, and this is where you had kind of 2 tacks with that, where the governor proposing what I think is, I don't want to speak for Ben, but I think the governor's proposal is probably our preference, which is just to have a budgetary line item for PACT that has some general fund dollars associated with it, because that's more predictable, it's more transparent, it's easier for us to plan. If we know we're going to, even if it's less than an ideal funding amount, we know exactly how much is going to be there each year, and we can plan for that. We can build those scholarships based off that, and the institutions can prepare knowing how many students they can expect to fund out of that. The Senate Democrats particularly were pushing this scheme that had kind of 3 separate funding mechanisms that they would look at. One, which is what was the original intent, which is iLottery funds. The other, that they would possibly bond an endowment for PACT, and then would obviously use the proceeds from that endowment to fund the program. The concern with that is the cost it would take to actually bond for that would be more expensive than the interest you're going to pay is going to be more expensive than just funding the program outright. So, and then there was, I can't remember the third. This session has dragged on, but essentially those have kind of been put to the wayside after the governor was proposed in his budget a standalone line item for PACT. I think a lot of legislators didn't anticipate that either the governor would be willing to do that or that there would be an appetite to include that. So that kind of changed the game. Having that in there makes it really easy. And we were ecstatic to see that, because having that in there makes it a lot easier to advocate for increasing that line item than it does to what our original plan was, to just advocate to have a standalone line item included. So what will more than likely happen, we won't know until the Appropriations Committee releases their budget proposal. But more than likely, if I was a gambling man, no pun intended with the iLottery there, but what I would expect is that, and based on the subcommittee's recommendations to fully fund the program, that we would expect the Appropriations Committee to put forward a proposal that would expand the governor's PACT line item to fully fund the program, based on the figures that we provided at our appropriations subcommittee hearing. So I think we won't know anything for sure until that budget is actually released and publicized, which we expect sometime in the next week or so. If we're going on, this is I can't overstate what a really weird year this is in that building. Nothing is working how it typically works. And a lot of trends aren't really holding through year to year, but one of the surest things is that appropriations usually drops their committee budget anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 days before their JF deadline. So we can expect that probably sometime between the 20th and the 22nd, if I was betting, and so we'll see then.
All right, thank you so much. Here's a quick question. If any of our representatives have questions about ongoing legislation that has crossover with higher education, would you be able to answer questions in emails and that type of thing?
Absolutely. I'm happy to. I will answer emails or answer questions in email, phone call, text message, Twitter, whatever works best for you guys. I'm happy to chat with you all and provide whatever information I can. I can't promise I will have answers or that the answers that I have will be good, but I'm always happy to give you whatever information I have. It's always GR is always tricky because a lot of what we work with is kind of rumors and hearsay, and it's kind of reading the tea leaves the best that we can until things are out and in the public. So I always put that caveat on whatever information I provide. It's the best information that we have at the time. But with that said, I'm happy to chat with anybody. My email, if any of you need it, is sbradbury@comnet.edu. SBRADBURY. And I won't oh, thank you, Audrey. And I won't put my cell phone in this since this will be publicized, but if you reach out, if you prefer phone call, happy to do that. Happy to do a Teams meeting, WebEx, whatever works for you.
Perfect. Well,
Thanks,
thank
Sean.
you. Does anybody have any further questions for Sean before we move forward? All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us.
Anytime, always happy to stop by.
All right, everybody. Let's kind of move down our agenda. Would it be helpful to you guys if I shared the screen with the agenda on it? Anybody have a preference? Okay. Pamela, would you be able to give me that access?
Doing it right now. Hold on.
No problem.
You are a presenter.
Perfect. Oh, 1 second. Just give me 1 second, guys. So our current topic is discussion of the government documents revisions. We haven't been able to appoint a committee chair, really meet on the side for this, but we've I will, if you would like to, Angelo, you can share a bit of what you shared with me about why it might not be necessary to do the government document revisions this cycle, and then maybe we can have a quick discussion about that.
Sure. You talking about the bylaws?
Yeah, so the bylaws, and then you guys had raised the possibility of the SAC changing in format.
Right. Oh, that was a yes. So as we move towards the Connecticut State Community College, the consolidation of the 12 community colleges, there's likely, more than likely, going to need several changes to the way that the Student Advisory Committee is comprised. As you know, the SAC, which you're all a part of, is an arm of the Board of Regents, and works as a committee on behalf of them, but it is statutorily formed and charged. So, as we go from 12 community colleges to, the Community College of Connecticut, Connecticut State Community College, the makeup and the composition of the SAC will likely need to be looked at in terms of, how the structure is, the representation, and what that looks like. So, as we, the train's left the station for that, and we've made good progress as we move over the next 18 months when things to come to fruition. As long as we get, NECHI approval, we will look at the SAC in terms of how does that best make sense to run and to be formed and really to respond to student needs. Now, obviously, the SAC will have a say in that and will assist with that process. But the thought was, as long as we have leadership in place, in terms of chair and vice chair specifically, it might not make sense to revise the format now, knowing that we're going to have to do it again in the next, 12 to 18 months, as opposed to reinventing the wheel. So that was the conversation that I had with Audrey a few weeks ago. And Audrey, was that a good overview, or did I miss anything?
Yes, I think that's a good overview. And I would just reiterate for everybody that the fundamental bones of the SAC, like Angela said, are laid out in the general statute. So there'll have to be a whole legislative process for those to change. But our bylaws aren't, they're not as strict because they go through specifically us. So it's ultimately up to you guys if you think that it's worthwhile to make changes when the committee is also going to have to probably make those changes again next year to reflect whatever the new format is. There are a few things that we could do, but I just want to hear from you guys if you have any pressing concerns about the bylaws, if you have any questions about the process, and then we can kind of scoot down our agenda.
Or if people want to think about it, that's fine as well. I know that we're coming up on time.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how much.
we can always return. But seeing no questions. Yeah, so Kelly raises a good point. The quorum issue is a pretty pressing issue. If we had a regular half and half, half plus one quorum, we would have had quorum both this meeting and our last meeting. But the 3 out of 5, 7 out of 12 quorum that we have is a bit it is stopping us from reviewing business. So that's one thing that you guys can think about, and maybe we can discuss at our next meeting. All right, so next on our agenda, I visited as Nuntuck and Claudia at their SGA meeting earlier this month, and we had a really excellent conversation. And I wanted to bring part of this conversation back to you guys about mental health resources throughout the system, because there is this big differential between the different community colleges and what's available to students for mental health resources. As you guys know, because you represent the different schools, some of the schools have a small, basically a small office with some counselors available and referrals to local organizations directly. And then some of the colleges have basically a page on the website that gives a hotline and maybe a list of resources where students have to kind of self-direct. As we're looking at students first progressing and at the potential of what would become one of the largest community colleges in the country, one thing that we could do as the SAC is to provide some guidance and suggestions to the systems office and the Board of Regents about how they can create a strong and equitable mental health program for that large college. Because obviously, if it's going to be one big program, there can't be such a differential between each campus's resources for mental health. Does this interest any of you as something that we can work on in the tail end of this year? And do you have any thoughts about what mental health resources look like on your campus that you want to share with us?
Hi, Audrey. This is Matt Driscoll from Eastern. We actually had this issue raised at our NECHI meeting. I believe we only have one counselor in our CAP system who is available to meet with students. And this is something that we're definitely going to have to look at going forward. I know from a administrative standpoint, we are sort of under that hiring freeze, but that is certainly something that the committee was sort of surprised at, and we'll be looking forward to changes in the coming future.
Yeah, and definitely the situation at the universities is kind of its own beast. But if we provided expectations from a student perspective to the Board of Regents for the community college, we could also kind of create like a saddle along recommendations to pass on to the universities too, who kind of handle their own mental health resource setup. Anybody else, any of the community colleges want to tell us about access to mental health on your campus? And if you're
Hi, sorry.
Okay.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Jocelyn from Housatonic Community College. For us, we have we're in the process of creating Tony, you could chime in if you know exactly what I'm talking about, but of just more of like mental health awareness and some resources to put in kiosks in case our students don't feel comfortable going to one of our counselors. But as far as we know, we have 2 counselors available at Housatonic. Sometimes they're on together, or at least there's one on campus at a time. Back when we were on campus, and they're still as we are aware of, they are active online since we've been on shutdown.
Yes. So to elaborate a bit more on what Jocelyn's saying, at Housatonic, we also partnered with JED. For those of you that don't know, it's a mental health awareness program that students can get involved in. As a JED participant myself, it kind of trains students on how to be there for one another and how to kind of mentor and aid other students through mental health crises and how to direct them in the right direction. She made a good point with the kiosk that we're trying to get on campus, but we have a pretty strong mental health awareness throughout the year, especially when we're actually on campus and not in a COVID year. During one of our first weeks in the fall semester, we would have these like mental health check-ins, where it would be like a big activity with service dogs that would come, and we would have a lot of active participants through the counseling center and the students that would just be there for people and help everybody.
That the JED Foundation seems to be pitching a lot of the colleges and universities in Connecticut right now. I know that WCSU is reviewing a pitch from them currently and might be adopting it. And I would imagine that that's happening also at different community colleges. That could be one thing that we could research, and if there's a lot of positive feedback for the JED Foundation or something similar, that could be something that we recommend to the systems office to look into for the combined college. Sherry in the chat mentions that ACC doesn't have any mental health counselors on campus, and the ACC SGA would support SAC in this. I know that we're holding you a little bit past time, so especially since we're operating kind of without quorum right now, if you guys would like, we can continue our conversation about this. I can even send you guys an email with a few things you could think about before our next meeting, specific questions like about your campuses. And because there have been some issues with timing, we'll have a quick conversation about that in case some adjustment would make it easier for some of the people who weren't able to make it today. But we could move the remainder of our new business to a special meeting at the end of April. Would you guys like that? I would have to send a specific announcement with an agenda through the system, but that might be useful for us. Would anyone object to that, basically? All right, Brandon says that sounds good. So I'll read out this last piece of information, and this is the type of thing you guys can think about so we can have this conversation next meeting too. DWCC has a wellness center, but resources and accessibility have been limited due to the lack of counselors. So right now it's crisis only. So that's one good thing to know about one of the colleges. And maybe what we could do also is we could look at one of, since we know that we're heading towards the possibility of this massive community college, we could look at what the enrollment would be for that. I'm sure, Angela, would you be able to help us get that number? I'm sure we've produced it a couple of times.
Sure.
And then we could look at a community college with a similar enrollment number elsewhere in the country and see what they're doing. And that could maybe help us think about this and formulate some recommendation. But I will call this meeting to a close at 11:36 a.m. And we will send out a notification for a special
Audrey?
meeting after we can have some discussion about it.
Audrey?
What's that?
Matt Driscoll's on the line. I think he had something he wanted to bring up. Matt, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. This will take like 2 minutes, but it is relatively important and kind of timely. So I think it's probably a good idea for me just to get this out there now. Just wanted to disclose something that Eastern's going through right now. Over the past couple weeks, it was revealed that there were serious issues in Eastern's administration and campus police in handling cases of sexual assault and rape. So Eastern has decided to hire a special third-party investigative team to sort of sort through this issue and find out exactly what happened and their role in it. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to impact the system. I'm not sure if Sean is still on. I kind of got on here a little late, but that would definitely be something to keep in mind with the Title IX revisions and other bills that are going through here. Additionally, this is probably going to play out over the summer and into the fall. So I think for the people who are coming in next year, I know Nora Amouche is our alternate, and if you have any questions, please contact me or her about this. You can always, reach out to me through email or my phone. So thank you, Kelly and Audrey, for that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Matt. Actually, would you mind, if you can, sending a short summary of the situation to the membership when you have some time?
Yes, I will try and write up a summary about that. I don't know how much we're able to disclose, but I will make sure I get all of the bullet points for that.
Okay, and we'll add it to the materials for our next meeting. That way it's public. So definitely make sure you're able to share it. All right, does anybody else have anything to share? All right. Then I'm going to call this meeting to a close at 11:38 a.m. Great job today, everybody. Let's all gestate on the information that our guest speakers gave us. And hopefully we'll have a great conversation like we did today at our next